Administration launched an immigration crackdown in the Twin Cities earlier this month. The Homeland Security Department says it is targeting criminals with outstanding deportation.
4:52 a.m. Los Angeles, California. Federal agents moved through darkness. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the sound of boots on pavement and the metallic click of weapons being checked one final time. The mansion sat on 3 acres in the Hollywood Hills, 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms. A view that stretched from downtown to the Pacific Ocean. Market value, $47 million, but the real question wasn't what the mansion was worth. It was how a network of Somali nationals with no visible income could afford it. The answer would expose the largest coordinated fraud scheme ever prosecuted on American soil. If you want the full truth about what federal agents found inside, hit like so this video reaches more people who need to know. Let me show you how deep this really goes. The investigation didn't start in Los Angeles. It started 2,000 miles away in Minneapolis with a single welfare claim that didn't add up. March 2019, a Minnesota fraud investigator noticed something unusual. A child care center in suburban Minneapolis was billing the state for 3,000 meals per day. The building could hold 50 children maximum. Someone was claiming to feed 60 times more kids than the facility could possibly serve. The investigator flagged the claim. It disappeared into the system. No follow-up, no audit, no investigation. The meals kept getting billed, the checks kept getting cut. And the money kept flowing into accounts that would eventually connect to that Hollywood Hills mansion. By 2021, the Minnesota Department of Education had paid out over $240 million to childcare centers that federal prosecutors now say were largely fictitious. The program was called Feeding Our Future. The promise was simple: feed hungry children in underserved communities. The reality was something else entirely. Shell companies with fake addresses, centers that existed only on paper, meal counts inflated by factors of 10 or 20 or 50. And at the center of it all was a network that investigators would trace back to Minneapolis, Columbus, Seattle, and eventually Somalia itself. This wasn't welfare fraud. This was industrial-scale theft with international connections. Comment exposed below if you're ready to see how federal agents unraveled the entire network. The FBI opened its investigation in August 2021. Agents started with financial records, bank statements showing deposits that far exceeded any legitimate childcare operation. One center reported feeding 400 children daily. Bank records showed they'd purchased enough food for 12. Another claimed 900 meals per day. Investigators found grocery receipts totaling $300 per month. The math didn't just fail to add up. It screamed fraud, but the financial trail revealed something even more disturbing. The money wasn't staying in Minnesota. It was moving. Wire transfers to accounts in Ohio. Cash deposits in Seattle. Cryptocurrency purchases in Columbus. And large international transfers to banks in Mogadishu, Nairobi, and Dubai. By November 2021, FBI agents had identified 47 individuals involved in the scheme. By January 2022, that number had grown to 78. The network was vast, coordinated, and operating with remarkable sophistication. They used encrypted messaging apps to communicate. They created elaborate paper trails with fake invoices and forged receipts. They recruited real parents to sign enrollment forms for children who never attended the centers. They even hired people to pose as employees during state inspections. When auditors showed up, the centers looked legitimate. Children played in rooms with educational posters. Staff members handed out meals. Everything appeared normal, but the children were borrowed. The staff were actors and the meals were props. The moment the auditors left, the operation shut down until the next inspection. The FBI estimates that between 2019 and 2022, the network stole over $480 million from state and federal nutrition programs. Type yes if you believe the people responsible should face maximum sentences. The raid planning took months. Federal prosecutors needed to coordinate with multiple agencies across 5 states: FBI, DEA, ICE, the U.S. Marshals Service, Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Ohio's Attorney General, Washington state investigators. The scale was unprecedented. By December 2024, prosecutors had secured indictments against 78 defendants, but arrests were complicated. Many suspects had fled the country, others had gone underground. The mansion in Los Angeles became a focal point. Intelligence suggested it was being used as a safe house and financial hub for the network's West Coast operations. Surveillance teams watched the property for 6 weeks. They documented arrivals and departures. They photographed license plates. They tracked patterns. What they discovered was stunning. The mansion was registered to an LLC based in Delaware. The LLC was owned by another company registered in Nevada. That company was controlled by a trust established in the Cook Islands. The ownership chain was designed to hide the real beneficiaries. But financial subpoenas eventually revealed the truth. The mansion had been purchased in 2022 with $3 million in cash. Wire transfers traced back to accounts in Minneapolis that had received funds from Feeding Our Future payments. The fraud money had been laundered through real estate. And the mansion wasn't alone. Federal agents identified 37 properties across 6 states purchased with stolen funds: houses in Minnesota, luxury condos in Columbus, a commercial building in Seattle, even a beachfront property in San Diego. Total value, $127 million. If this shocks you, hit like now before we show you what agents found inside the mansion. December 18, 2024. 4:52 a.m. the tactical team assembled 2 blocks from the target, 32 agents, 4 vehicles, battering rams, flashbangs, and a warrant authorizing search and seizure. The mansion was dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. At 4:58 a.m. the convoy moved, headlights off, engines quiet. At 5:02 a.m. agents reached the front gate. The property had a 10-foot security fence. Cameras mounted at every corner. Motion sensors along the driveway. None of it mattered. Agents cut the chain on the gate. The vehicles rolled through. Within seconds, teams surrounded every exit. At 5:04 a.m. the battering ram struck the front door. The sound echoed through the canyon like a gunshot. The door splintered. Agents poured inside. Flashlights swept through marble hallways and vaulted ceilings. Federal agents, search warrant, get on the ground. Upstairs, someone screamed. Agents moved room by room: master bedroom, guest suites, a home theater, a wine cellar that could hold 500 bottles. In the third bedroom, they found 6 people sleeping on mattresses on the floor. No furniture, no personal belongings, just people living in a $47 million mansion like it was a flophouse. Agents detained everyone. Zip ties, Miranda rights. Questions shouted over protests in Somali and broken English. Who owns this house? Who paid for it? How long have you been here? Most claimed they didn't know. They said they were staying temporarily. They said someone named Ahmed had offered them a place to stay. No one could provide Ahmed's last name. Share this so more people understand how these networks operate in plain sight. The real discoveries came when agents searched the basement. Behind a wine rack that looked permanently installed, they found a hidden door. The rack slid sideways on tracks. The door behind it was steel reinforced with a biometric lock. Agents used a hydraulic spreader to breach it. Inside was a room that didn't match the rest of the house. No windows, concrete walls, industrial shelving units lined with cardboard boxes. The first box agents opened contained $680,000 in cash, mostly hundreds, bundled with rubber bands, no bank wrappers. The second box held ledgers, handwritten entries in multiple languages, names, dates, amounts, account numbers. The third box was filled with passports, 17 U.S. passports, 11 Somali passports, 6 Kenyan. 4 from various European countries, all with different names, all with the same faces. The fourth box contained phones, 43 smartphones, all powered off, many with SIM cards removed. The fifth box held documents, incorporation papers for LLCs, bank account statements, wire transfer receipts, invoices for services never rendered. Agents counted 9 boxes total. By the time they finished cataloging everything, the evidence filled 3 vehicles. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't in the basement, it was in the garage. This wasn't just a safe house, this was operational headquarters. Comment justice below if you believe everyone involved deserves prison time. The garage had been converted into an office space. Desks, computers, printers, filing cabinets. On the walls were maps, not decorative maps. Working maps with colored pins marking locations across the United States. Red pins in Minneapolis. Blue pins in Columbus. Green pins in Seattle. Yellow pins in cities agents were still trying to identify. Each pin corresponded to a location in the ledgers. Each location represented a site where fraudulent claims had been filed. The network was bigger than anyone had imagined. Agents seized 8 computers. Forensic analysis would take months, but preliminary examinations revealed communications with over 200 individuals across 14 states. Encrypted chat logs discussed routing funds, detailed instructions for filing false claims, warnings about increased scrutiny from state auditors. One message from July 2023 read, "Minnesota too hot now. Move operations to Ohio and Washington. Use the new center names." Another from November 2023, Feds asking questions, shut down groups 4 and 7, liquidate property in St. Paul. The network had been aware of investigations and had actively adapted to avoid detection. They'd closed fraudulent centers before audits could be completed. They'd transferred assets before seizure orders could be executed. They'd moved money offshore before subpoenas could freeze accounts. This wasn't opportunistic fraud by amateurs. This was organized crime operating with sophistication that rivaled drug cartels. And the financial trail kept getting darker. Type investigate if you want authorities to follow every dollar to the end. Forensic accountants traced the money through 14 countries. From Minneapolis banks, funds moved to accounts in Ohio. From Ohio, wire transfers went to shell companies in Delaware and Nevada. From there, money flowed to cryptocurrency exchanges. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, privacy coins designed to obscure transactions. The crypto was converted back to cash through exchanges in Dubai and Istanbul. From there, physical currency moved through informal Hawala networks into East Africa. Investigators estimate that at least $80 million reached Somalia. Some went to legitimate businesses, construction projects, import-export companies, real estate developments in Mogadishu, but federal intelligence agencies believe a substantial portion went to Al-Shabaab. The terrorist organization has long funded itself through extortion and smuggling, but evidence suggests they've increasingly relied on diaspora fraud schemes. Phone intercepts from 2022 captured conversations between network members and individuals identified as Al-Shabaab facilitators. One intercept from March 2022, "The funds will support our brothers, you are doing righteous work." Another from August 2022, "We need another transfer soon, operations require resources." The Justice Department hasn't formally charged anyone with terrorism financing yet, but prosecutors say that investigation is ongoing. The implications are staggering. American taxpayer money intended to feed hungry children was stolen and potentially funneled to a terrorist organization responsible for attacks that have killed thousands. If you believe this demands a full congressional investigation, comment investigate below. The arrests came in waves. December 2024, January 2025, February 2025. Federal agents arrested 57 individuals across 9 states. Charges included wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and making false statements. The defendants ranged from the network's organizers to low-level participants who filed fraudulent claims. But 21 indicted individuals remain fugitives. Intelligence suggests most fled to Somalia, Kenya, or other East African countries with no extradition treaties. The Justice Department has requested Interpol red notices. But realistically, those fugitives may never face American courts. The financial seizures were more successful. Federal agents froze $43 million in bank accounts. They seized 37 properties worth $127 million. They confiscated vehicles, jewelry, and other assets totaling another $6 million. In total, the government has recovered approximately $176 million. That's less than 40% of what was stolen. The rest is gone, spent, laundered beyond recovery, or hidden in accounts that investigators haven't found yet. The prosecutions are still ongoing. As of February 2025, 41 defendants have pleaded guilty. Sentences have ranged from probation to 20 years in federal prison. The ringleaders face the harshest penalties. Prosecutors are seeking sentences exceeding 30 years for the top organizers, but even maximum sentences can't undo the damage. Hit subscribe so you don't miss updates as more defendants are sentenced and fugitives are apprehended. The systemic failures were as shocking as the fraud itself. How did Minnesota pay out $480 million without detecting obvious red flags? State auditors were understaffed and overwhelmed. The nutrition program expanded rapidly during COVID-19. Normal oversight procedures were waived to speed up payments to centers serving children during the pandemic. The network exploited that chaos. Applications that would normally take weeks to process were approved in days. Meal counts that should have triggered audits were paid without question. Claims that exceeded logical capacity were processed automatically. State employees later told investigators they'd flagged suspicious activity repeatedly, but their warnings were ignored by supervisors focused on meeting federal deadlines for program spending. One auditor testified, "I reported the same center 3 times, nothing happened. The payments continued." Another said, "We were told to approve claims faster. Questions slowed things down." The pressure to distribute funds quickly created an environment where fraud could flourish, but the failures went beyond bureaucracy. They extended to political will. Minnesota officials have faced criticism for creating a sanctuary environment that made prosecution and deportation difficult. Federal agents executing arrest warrants encountered interference. Protesters blocked roads. Activists surrounded homes. Local officials publicly condemned ICE operations. One ICE supervisor radioed for help. "We have 60 to 70 agitators fighting us. We need backup." Minneapolis police responded but mainly helped agents leave the scene. No arrests were made for obstruction. The message was clear: enforcing immigration law in Minneapolis would be contested at every step. That reality complicated the Justice Department's efforts to dismantle the network. If you believe states that obstruct federal law enforcement should lose funding, comment enforce below. The broader implications are impossible to ignore. This case exposed vulnerabilities in welfare systems across the country. If Minnesota could lose $480 million, how much are other states losing to similar schemes? Federal investigators are examining nutrition programs in Ohio, Washington, Arizona, and Oregon for comparable fraud. Preliminary findings suggest the problem is national. Ohio reported suspicious activity in its childcare subsidy program totaling $67 million. Washington identified potential fraud involving $43 million. Arizona is investigating claims exceeding $30 million. The pattern is consistent: shell companies, inflated claims, networks operating across state lines. And in multiple states, investigators have found connections to Somali diaspora communities. That's not an indictment of an entire community. The vast majority of Somali Americans are law-abiding people contributing positively to their communities. But it is a recognition that organized networks have exploited cultural and linguistic barriers to commit fraud at scale. Investigators note that tight-knit communities with strong overseas connections create opportunities for sophisticated financial crimes. Money can move quickly through informal networks. Language barriers make it harder for auditors to detect fraud. Cultural insularity makes it difficult for outsiders to penetrate networks. Those aren't excuses, they're realities that prosecutors must navigate, and they're patterns that federal agencies must disrupt. Share this video so more communities understand the scope of this issue. The political dimension is unavoidable. Minnesota's former governor, now vice presidential candidate, presided over the state during much of this fraud. His administration expanded access to welfare programs for undocumented immigrants. It created an Office of New Americans. It issued driver's licenses regardless of immigration status. Critics argue those policies created an environment where fraud could thrive. Supporters say the policies were compassionate responses to vulnerable populations. But regardless of intent, the outcome is clear. Hundreds of millions of dollars were stolen on his watch. Congressional Republicans called him to testify in 2025. He denied that Minnesota was a sanctuary state. He argued the fraud was a failure of federal oversight, not state policy, but the money was stolen from state-administered programs. The checks were cut by state agencies. The oversight failures occurred at the state level. Federal prosecutors are now investigating whether state officials ignored warnings or failed to act on evidence of fraud. No state employees have been charged criminally, but civil lawsuits are pending. The question remains: were state officials complicit, negligent, or simply overwhelmed? The answer will shape accountability for one of the largest public corruption scandals in American history. Comment accountability if you believe state officials must answer for these failures. The mansion in Los Angeles sits empty now. Federal marshals seized it in January 2025. It will eventually be sold at auction. The proceeds will go toward restitution for the victims. But the real victims aren't taxpayers who lost money. They're the children who never received the meals those programs were designed to provide. Hungry kids in underserved communities whose needs were exploited by criminals. Federal prosecutors estimate that fewer than 30% of the meals billed were actually served. That means hundreds of thousands of children went hungry while fraudsters pocketed money meant for their care. That's the human cost that numbers can't capture. This wasn't just financial crime. It was theft from the most vulnerable, and the consequences extend beyond empty stomachs. Trust in institutions has been damaged. Communities that relied on nutrition programs now face increased scrutiny and reduced funding. Legitimate childcare centers struggle with audits and oversight that slow down operations. The damage spreads like cracks through concrete. When public systems are exploited at this scale, everyone suffers. And when justice takes years to arrive, faith and accountability weakens. But the fight continues. Federal prosecutors say more indictments are coming, more arrests, more asset seizures. They're determined to follow every dollar. To prosecute every participant, to send a message that fraud at this scale will not be tolerated. But the message only matters if the sentences match the crime. If you believe justice is worth fighting for, hit like now. This video isn't over. 21 fugitives remain at large. Millions in stolen funds are still hidden. International investigations continue. And the systemic vulnerabilities that allowed this fraud remain largely unaddressed. Congress has introduced legislation to strengthen oversight of federal nutrition programs. States are implementing new verification requirements. Auditors are being trained to detect sophisticated fraud schemes. But reform takes time, and while bureaucrats debate policy, criminals adapt. The network that stole $480 million from Minnesota has been disrupted, but investigators believe similar networks are operating in other states. The fraud didn't end with these arrests, it evolved. That's why this video matters. That's why you need to share it, because the next scheme is already underway. The next network is already filing claims. The next mansion is already being purchased with stolen money, and the only way to stop it is through awareness, accountability, and relentless enforcement. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Comment justice if you believe every perpetrator should face maximum penalties. Share this video so more people understand how vulnerable our systems really are. This is only the beginning. The fight for accountability continues. The hunt for fugitives continues. The recovery of stolen funds continues. And the question remains, how many more networks are operating right now in communities across America? The answer should terrify you. Because if Minnesota could lose $500 million, what's happening in states with even less oversight? Stay vigilant, stay informed. And demand accountability from every official at every level. Because when institutions fail, criminals win. And the cost is measured in hungry children, broken trust, and millions of dollars flowing to those who deserve it least. This doesn't end with arrests. It ends with reform. Or it doesn't end at all.